Iran is currently in a very big trouble. Currently, as we speak, the President Trump's economic pressure is beginning to strangle the country almost to its knees now. As we are speaking now, $1 US is directly equivalent to 2 million Iranian rial. This is the worst the currency has ever done since the history of the country. And as if that's not all, Iran is currently losing total control of the Hormuz Strait. In fact, there are reports that in 1 week now, the total number of vessels that has gone through that place is an increment of up to 400%. That is crazy.
Yeah, hey guys, good morning. The United States is set to unleash new economic sanctions against Iran to put fresh pressure on the regime in Tehran. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent on Sunday wrote in the Financial Times, President Donald Trump and the overwhelming might of our military have significantly dismantled Iran's military capabilities and weakened its nuclear program. Now we are entering the end game. At dawn begins an economic D-Day, the single greatest financial offensive ever marshaled against an adversary. The economic pressure comes as the Iranian rial crossed 2 million to $1 US, a historic low for the country's currency. The head of Iran's Supreme National Security Council responded on X, saying if the economic war continues, not a single drop of oil will be exported, neither through the Strait of Hormuz nor from anywhere in the Persian Gulf. Iran will regard any country's participation in or support for America's economic war against the Iranian people as an act of war. Despite this statement, reports do indicate that crossings through the Strait of Hormuz are up 400% over the last 2 weeks. The United States is overseeing vessels out of the Persian Gulf through a safer southern passage. The passage allows for millions of barrels of crude oil to be exported each day. Still, the Iranians remain defiant.
The fact that the United States has once again moved from military threats, saying that it will strike and so on, to reviving its old plans shows that they are truly desperate and have no solution when it comes to the great Iranian nation. Therefore, they keep bringing their old plans back onto the scene.
The U.S. naval blockade also remains in place as CENTCOM says 70 commercial vessels have been redirected since the blockade was reimposed. In terms of U.S. military movement, the USS Abraham Lincoln is headed home after being deployed for 274 days. This aircraft carrier made its last port call in December, breaking a Navy record. The vessel is being replaced by the Japan-based USS George Washington. On Friday, President Trump doubled down on his position that the Strait of Hormuz is now U.S. territory.
They'll never have a nuclear weapon. They want to make a deal so badly. We don't even know if we want, because I view the Strait of Hormuz as an American territory right now. It's an American territory.
The question remains, will this economic pressure lead to a deal or a return to combat? Guys?
Trey, just cue, here we go, delay a game. Pakistan says, I've been talking to Iran, and they're really serious this time. You know they're going to call the president. They're going to say, look, you got their attention. Please hold off. We've seen this dance now for 6 months. Do you think they will be successful in delaying what's going to be announced at 2 o'clock Eastern today?
I doubt it, because there is a lot of momentum here, and the Trump administration is looking to put new pressure on the regime. Actually, today, Brian, interestingly, the Pakistani field marshal is in Tehran meeting with Iranian officials. You're exactly right. They're trying to delay. It's the same playbook as before. And we've been stuck in this cycle of statements and strikes with no end in sight. And right now, there is no indication that this present moment is any different, because the Iranians are used to this stalling tactic. And we have to look at the reality on the ground. There are still threats against vessels in the Strait. There is this operation behind the scenes that is allowing millions of barrels of Gulf crude oil to be exported. But the Iranians haven't really changed their tune. And you still have these IRGC officials that are making threats against U.S. forces and allies across the Middle East. And so I think it's important to wait and see what happens. But we have to look at the facts on the ground and not the statements or even deals that may be reached in the future. Because as we saw earlier this summer, even when the memorandum of understanding was signed between the United States and Iran, it was immediately violated.
Yeah. Trey, will more economic pressure, will it change Iran's behavior?
The hope here for the United States and Israel is that long-term it will. And we are starting to see, according to regional intelligence sources, clear indications inside of Iran that they are feeling this economic pressure, because you have the U.S. naval blockade, and it is not allowing the Iranians to export their critical oil. That is how they prop up their economy. And they have very few options in terms of stabilizing their currency. And that is why it's currently at a historic low, 2 million rial to $1 US. And there are efforts underway to try and ensure that these economic measures are not affecting the Iranian people directly. But the reality is they are facing pressure internally. And the regime is concerned about the possibility that protests could erupt again inside of Iran because the price of goods is rising. And they are feeling the reality of this economic situation.
So, Trey, I guess the big question is, if this pressure is really going to hit them, that means that Russia and China are going to get the message from the president, which is back off. Is there any indication that they intend on standing down right now?
At this point, no, but it's very interesting because when we look back earlier this month, the president actually put out a post on Truth Social, and it was a message to countries around the world that if they support the Iranian economy or they try to skirt these economic sanctions to help officials in Tehran, that they will face economic consequences of their own. This has shifted now from kinetic action to economic warfare. And again, the question remains, will it actually change the behavior of regime officials in Tehran? But it's interesting because when you look at these other countries, historically, they've tried to get around any sort of economic measures against the Iranians. And the indication is that the U.S. Treasury is watching closely. And if they try to conduct this behavior, again, they will face economic consequences of their own.
All right, Trey, thanks so much. Appreciate it. We'll see what happens after the announcement's made.